Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Andrew Mallett and yes, I am the Urban Penguin, but you probably already know that. Today we're continuing our series looking at Linux security and in particular the LPIC Level 3 exam 303 for Linux security. We're looking at the Linux audit system, which is something that you're definitely going to need to know for the exam. We've already seen it working on our CentOS systems, and that was CentOS 7, but you have it on CentOS 7 as well as CentOS 6, so it's certainly been around for a number of years. But we're going to be taking a look at it now on Ubuntu 18.04. Now, it's not installed by default on Ubuntu, but we're going to look at why you probably want it installed. The audit system is there to be able to track exactly who is doing what on your system, whether it's a service account or whether it's an ordinary user account. Now, although many people do use the sudo command for carrying out tasks, if you've got to do a lot of tasks as root, you might be a little bit more lazy and find it easier to run the su- command to get a root shell through that using the substitute user, or even going through and using sudo-i. With this, even though we can track that you opened up an administrative shell, from then on it's difficult to track who did what, and that's where our audit system comes in. So enough talk, and let's move on to our console. So here we are on my Ubuntu 18.04 system, and you might notice that I've changed the colours of my shell. I do listen to your feedback and I appreciate every little piece of feedback that I get from you. Your feedback can help me improve the channel, so thank you very much. Now, if we go through and carry out some tasks, if I go through maybe and just run a sudo and use add -m to create the home directory and the Bob user, so that's now created it. If I go through and look for this happening, I can go through and tail /file/log and then look in the auth log, and let's get this all spelled nice and correctly. So we can see then as we go through, we've run the sudo command and we can see that it was tux. We can see then the home directory and the user being created, so everything is good. Whereas if I clear the screen, and maybe if I do something like this, where we do a sudo-i, so this is going to give me an interactive shell. Now, I could enter this shell and then not run any commands for a long time. There might be also many other administrators that are also doing the same thing. So now when we come through and maybe do a user del -r bob, so we're removing the Bob account, and my keyboard doesn't seem to want to type correctly today, but there you go, that account now is deleted. When we exit out of this and go back and look in the auth log, we can see that the user was deleted and we can see that tux gained an administrative shell. But when we look at the delete user, there's no real indication of who ran that command. So this is the limitation. Now you might look at this and start seeing, well, it's fairly obvious who ran the command because we go in with this sudo-i, we delete a user, and then we close that session. So from that point of view, we might feel it's easy to track. But say you might have 5 or 6 administrators and they might typically go in with su or sudo-i early on in the day, and then we get a whole load of activity during the day that we're unable to track. So this is where we can go through then and install our software. So we want to put on the audit system, so that's going to be the Audit DE service, and we want the plugins. So once we've got these installed, we'll be able to start seeing a lot more activity. So now when I go through and let's do a sudo user add -m and Bob. Now remember, we could track this anyway, but we've got our new tool we can use now. So we can go through and do our sudo au search, and then the message that we're searching for is going to be add_user, and then we can have the -- start time being recent, so within the last 10 minutes. Now we can see then that message type, add user, we've got the audit event number, we've got the process ID, it was being run as root, so user ID equals 0, but we can see the actual user ID. Now remember, this was done through sudo, so the reality is we don't have too much of a problem tracking this in any case. What was more difficult if we did the sudo -i, so this is where we gained our root shell, and then did our user del -r, so it deletes the home directory and any mail file that they have, and the Bob account. Now when I exit out this, if I go through now and recall my AU search, this time of course I'm looking for a Dell user. There are different message types, and it's just nice that we have got message types for our delete user and our add user, so it's easy to search these. But I could just not worry about the message type and just look for recent events. But we can see then that we've got our operation deleting user, and when we go through we can see then the command that was run, but importantly we can see the actual user ID was 1000. That's the Tux account. So in this way we're able to track exactly who did what. And depending in the environment that you work, that could be very important or it may not be very important. Let's say in my system here where I'm working mainly with training systems, well, to be honest, it's not very important. Most of the time we are working as root and there's one person working on that system. But if you're working any sort of financial system, it's probably going to be very important that we know exactly who did what, and the Linux audit system is going to be what you need installed to ensure you can track who did what. So that's it. Hopefully you really understand now what the audit system is really about and how you can enhance other operating systems that don't have the audit system, such as Ubuntu, by adding the audit system to Ubuntu.